Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Kitcar Shorts, the series where we look at some of the more unusual cars from the kit car industry past. And today's car, the Moss Monaco, is a bit of an automotive nut job, to say the least. Now, Moss Cars was the creation of John Copperthwaite. It was his first foray into the kit and component car industry, not his last. After he sold on the business, the Owners Club took it on for a while. But the first car in the Moss range that was developed by John was the Moss Roadster, a Morgan-esque, inspired by Morgan, not a replica, but you could see the inspiration, two-seater. And then came the Mulvan, which was a four-seat version of the Roadster. Very practical, popular with the family buyer. After those two 1930-style Roadsters came the Mamba, which is a rather charming 1950s sports car. Very much Alfa-esque in its styling. Again, all of those based on Triumph Herald running gear. Later on, he developed a ladder chassis to take Ford Escort running gear. And then came the Monaco, this car. Now, again, it was based on Triumph chassis. The Herald was too long a wheelbase. You could either shorten that or use the Spitfire that it was intended for. And there was a shortened version of the Escort chassis available as well. But most people went with the Spitfire as the donor. Now, the idea of the Monaco was to evoke the 1950s racing cars, the Formula One cars, cigar on wheels. And I think you could safely say, in terms of shape, it does kind of bring back images of those days, but its other purpose was to be a very cheap, entry-level, fun car. And to that end, they were sold for around £500, which in those days, even in the 1980s, that was very, very cheap. The body kit was GRP, and it came with the main body, the pods for the headlamps, the cycle wings, and very little else. The interior was a bench seat, and it was meant to be a fun car that you could have a bit of a riot in. And to say the least, the drivers of the day, the magazines, commented on how exposed you felt sitting on top of that bench seat. Much like the racing drivers of the 1950s, it's fair to say. Acceleration was electric with all that weight taken off. It weighed a lot less than 500 kilos. So 500 being the number of choice around the Monaco, to say the least. It was I don't know how many were sold, but it was certainly a great idea to make a very cheap kit car. And it filled the purpose that kit cars were meant for, which is basically to offer things that you couldn't buy from mainstream manufacturers. And it's pretty hard to think of a mainstream manufacturer mad enough to try and offer something like this for their customers. I mean, the rollover protection or lack of would certainly have put an awful lot of turnkey buyers off. And you certainly need to take your brave pills before you were to give a Monaco a good thrashing, to say the least. It's probably a great car for having some fun down A and B roads and, driving through little villages waving at people, because you are going to be the centre of attention. Now, this particular car and the photographs were kindly provided by Baz at the Kitcar Museum in the Netherlands, a friend of mine. You will see from, if you go back on the channel to the early days, one of the first features we did was the road trip to Sweden. And in episodes of both our road trips, we visited Baz and had a look around at the cars. But this is a car, the first car that he actually imported to the Netherlands from the UK, and he sold it on to a customer, and 20 years later, he bought it back. But I think you'll agree, it's got an awful lot of charm, an awful lot of character. I'm not sure I'd be brave enough to take it to its limits, but my goodness, what a lot of fun. And, it filled its purpose. It was a nice, cheap, early entry level car for the first time builder. And in that, it served its purpose. Now, John Copperthwaite went on to create the JC Midge, which was a plans built car, much like the Burlington Arrow of the time. And a few of those survive as well. But if you've got a Moss, do contact us. Yes, if you've got a Malvern Roadster or a Mamba or a Monaco, we would love to come and do a feature. So send us an email to enwinsseats@gmail.com and send a couple of photos as well if you could.